And welcome back to Wealthier's Enterprise Resilience Series with Richard Davis and Jacob Vandersteen. Richard, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Jacob. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited about the topics that we're going to talk about as they're germane to national security, they're germane to enterprise security and efficiency and things of that nature. So let's get into it.
Let's get into it indeed. And likewise. So we've talked a lot about enterprise resilience, cybersecurity, different approaches, unique approaches, different technologies, and all those kind of things that enterprises and executives should be aware about. But we haven't really talked much about our delivery model that we've created, which we call CAM, which is the Cryptographic Awareness and Agility Maturity Model, which is a performance aligned approach for enterprises that are sitting there, and enterprise execs or CISOs are saying, my budget's allocated. I don't know how I can squeeze more performance out of this budget. We've put together, again, this performance aligned model. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, but also a key relevant topic in cybersecurity, as we always do. And that's called Fast Flux. It was just released by CISA. So Rich, tell us a little bit about Fast Flux, and we'll talk and parlay that into how CAM can help CISOs take action on this today without having to break their budgets.
Yeah. So Jacob, thanks for bringing that up. As most security professionals know, CISA is doing a fantastic job of providing awareness across the private sector, across governmental agencies on a domestic level with a vast amount of intel on threat actors, new tactics, techniques, and procedures that can have significant adverse impact on enterprises and infrastructure. The infrastructure of the internet is predicated on DNS, domain name service. And this infrastructure is designed as an address book of sorts for the internet. And if you're sitting behind your computer and you're sending an email, there's a set of servers that will essentially route your request to the destination, right? And the ability to do so reliably is the predicate of the entire internet. To the extent that a threat actor can spoof certain information that's contained in these address books, it can result in an organization going to a destination, an individual, an application going to a destination that they shouldn't, that they don't want to go to. And the DNS servers contain all kinds of records. You have a name server, you have a CNAME, you have various metadata attributes that are tied to a particular IP or series of IP addresses, which enables your query or your input to a URL to resolve to a particular IP, to a destination IP. And if that information is adulterated in some way, it can result in significant catastrophic attacks. And this new attack that CISA just put out a bulletin on just this morning, probably around 9:30, I got the email. I'm a subscriber to the alerts. This new attack is called Fast Flux. And I love the name, but besides the name, I don't like what it does. So the records that are in these DNS servers can be rotated. They can be rotated in such a way that the true address, the true record information, the true record metadata is obfuscated. And in place of the true record data is a threat actor manufactured record. And that is very problematic. And so when you have name server spoofing or authoritative name server information, it's actually at the server level. You have the server and then you have the records within the server. There are ways to attack the records within the DNS server, the authoritative name server, and there are ways to attack at the server level. And so the single flux part of Fast Flux refers to the ability to change the A records that are associated with a record. Double flux piece comes in when they simultaneously not only change the record, but they also obfuscate or hide the server, replacing it with another fake server. And this technique is currently being used by threat actors that are some of the more sophisticated threat actors. It's currently being used, and the effectiveness of this approach is predicated on the fact that a lot of detection capabilities won't be able to detect what's going on if the speed with which this replacement or rotation occurs is faster than the detection ability to capture the information. So that's on a high level. I'm actually coming out with a white paper that describes in great detail the nature of the attack and also how this can be completely mitigated to the point where it's not of concern at all. Okay. Quite a bit of thought went into that. And as we get in further into the discussion, we'll be talking a little bit about the actual techniques that the ability to mitigate this attack. But it's a very serious attack. The government is looking to some of the main players in the space to provide certain information. And so you've got all kinds of data that's out there that these providers such as Palo Alto, Zscaler, and others can provide.
And what kind of organizations and enterprises are at risk for something like this?
I would say every organization is at risk. Every organization that you could possibly think of that uses the internet, anybody that uses the internet is at risk.
So enterprises of all sizes, what kind of industries or targets would be most focused on for these cyber criminals? What would they be really looking for in terms of vulnerabilities or maybe data that they could exfiltrate? What are there things that stand out more than others?
It's more of a man in the middle attack kind of scenario. That's the scenario where they can insert themselves into transactions in a way. So financial institutions, banking, any kind of financial institution, any kind of healthcare institution, any company that's in the critical infrastructure area. It's the kind of attack that it's a kind of attack that allows an attacker to get all of your information, all of your data. It's the kind of attack that allows for phishing, that allows for credential harvesting, that allows for business email compromise ultimately. There's so many different facets and so many different types of organizations can be adversely affected.
And we talk about SIEMs a lot. Give some insight on SIEMs and some potential different approaches as CISA is recommending that ESPs and other managers of DNS and enterprise situations and settings are using things like boundary firewalls, DNS resolvers, and or SIEM solutions.
Yeah. So a SIM, Security Information Event Management System, the most popular of which is Splunk, is essential to gathering relevant information that can help identify some of the indicators of a potential fast flux scenario, as well as a host of other types of attacks. The challenge with today's SIMs is that many implementations are very costly to implement, costly to maintain, and it's almost as though it has a drag to some degree on the organization. There's a point beyond which if a SIM is too bloated, if a SIM is too complex to operate, if you don't have the requisite subject matter expertise, it becomes a drag on the enterprise. The other piece is that most SIMs today aren't using some of the capabilities that we are extolling in our podcast series or in our consulting efforts. They're not leveraging post-quantum ready encryption algorithms such as Crystal's dilithium and Crystal's Kyber. They're still reliant, very heavily reliant. In fact, the whole SIM ingestion, normalization, ETL, and correlation pipeline is reliant on curve cryptography, RSA algorithms, AES algorithms, which are what I would call, I don't want to call them, but I would call them cryptographic primitives at this point. The challenge for many organizations is to identify points within a SIM ingestion, transformation, and correlation pipeline. Where is the optimal place to, or low-hanging fruit to begin to swap out some of these new algorithms? A SIM is really important if you have a large enterprise generating a lot of telemetry. You have a lot of endpoints, you have a lot of networks, you have a lot of peripheral devices, firewalls and such. You have a lot of assets in your, in your cloud estate, you may have a lot of IoT, telemetry, et cetera. You have to aggregate all of this information to truly have visibility. You got to aggregate all this information and then be able to, within that huge aggregated set of data with telemetry from all over the place, ferret out those things that you need to focus on. And the next topic that we're going to get into, which is the cryptographic agility and awareness model, that is something, maturity model, that is something that we developed in order to help organizations begin to understand where the low-hanging fruit is, where the optimal points of injecting these new cryptographic algorithms, where those points are.
So talk more about CAM and how an organization could use the CAM model to adapt and deal with and prevent a fast flux threat. And beyond that, what the implications are for their cybersecurity infrastructure.
So let's talk a little bit about what CAM is designed to do. There are CISOs that are members of the information sharing and analysis centers across the country in different sectors. There are 27, 28 different centers. And by far and away, the ones I'm familiar with are the HISAC and the FSISAC. Security professionals that are in the ISAC, that are involved in ISAC communities, are typically briefed on a wide variety of topics. One of those topics is the burgeoning need to assess the cryptographic schemes and frameworks that are used within the enterprise. Why is this? In 1994, Dr. Peter Shore, part of AT&T Labs, theorized that at some point there would be a computer powerful enough to solve the factoring problems that all of the elliptic curve cryptography, RSA, and AES algorithms are predicated on. And when that day came, those algorithms would be deprecated. Those algorithms would no longer function in terms of security. And what would essentially happen is the person who, or the entity or nation state that came out with the first cryptographically relevant quantum machine would be able to read the secrets of the world. And I mean that quite literally. There would be no secrets that are secrets. There would be no encryption powerful enough to withstand that machine's ability to break the encryption. And this is a problem for defense departments all over the world. It's also set off a private sector and government sector arms race to see who's going to be the first to develop it. So that's a history or backdrop. So the CAM model is designed to help organizations figure out how they can begin to engage in the cryptographic analysis and readiness and assessment activities that NIST and CISA are recommending that they engage in. It's predicated on understanding the critical business processes within the environment. To the extent an organization has a relatively decent CMDB, configuration management database, that has all of the relevant information about the assets, the hardware assets, the software assets within the enterprise, that's really a very good starting point, is to understand from a restoration level, right? Recovery time objective, for example, is a measurement that's used to determine how quickly certain applications in the environment need to be restored. Recovery point objective, recovery time objective, these are metrics that one can use to analyze the contents of a SIM to the extent that data is there. ServiceNow does a really good job of having a lot of metadata fields, some of which should have that information. That allows you to begin triaging the critical applications within the enterprise. It allows you to begin to create a value chain, as it were, of applications that support business processes. And the CAM model is one that we have developed to facilitate engagement with clients that are interested in understanding where they should begin with their cryptographic digital transformation journey. So we can come in and help organizations figure out what approach is best to do the assessment, look at upstream dependencies, look at downstream dependencies, look at low-hanging fruit opportunities, and develop a pathway to implementing the new cryptographic algorithms that's foundational. And when I say foundational, you don't want to necessarily have a plan for application by application. You want to have a foundational backbone or foundational cryptographic objective within the enterprise. And then from there, begin to triage and understand what are the critical business processes, what are the dependencies, upstream, downstream, and where you can begin. And that also has to extend into the vendor population, right? That you're cryptographically safe, but your critical application vendors are not, then they become the weakest link in the chain. And you want to make sure that your chain is highly.
Exactly. So CAM is about getting in and understanding exactly where in your enterprise or organization there is room for improvement, where it's critical to improve sooner rather than later, perhaps even now, when it comes to changing over the encryption algorithm, undergoing that transformation process. But also, it's about really diving in and understanding where your risk is, again, on a present day basis, like in areas like third-party vendor management, which we just saw an attack on Oracle that revealed about 6 million records across 140,000 hosts or tenants in their cloud architecture. So talk a little bit about some of the present day things that CAM can assist with and why it's important to start taking these approaches now.
Yeah, I cannot begin to stress the importance. A lot of folks say, why do I need to be concerned about post-quantum cryptography? There isn't a computer that can break my algorithm just yet. The algorithm's in use just yet. The harvest now, decrypt later is a moniker that's been given to the methodology that, or philosophy, I should say, that certain threat actors have. And to counter that, there are certain forward-thinking security leaders that say, I want to end the harvest now, decrypt later threat. And how do you do that now? You do that now by implementing post-quantum cryptography algorithms. Because if you had a data set today that's encrypted, and with the crystals Kyber, crystals dilithium, et cetera, the data that's in flight and the data that's at rest would not be decryptable if it was intercepted or if it was exfiltrated. On a go forward basis, you would end, and I repeat, you would end the harvest now, decrypt later risk. Okay. That's the importance of doing it now. And that's the counter argument to, hey, there's no cryptographically relevant quantum computer here today. Why do I need to do it? I just explained why.
And then let's talk further about those third-party vendor management risks, a little bit about the Oracle attack, and also how using this performance-aligned approach, which we've developed, helps to drive security EBITDA.
Oh, yeah. I love that topic. With regard to vendor management, again, it's really, really important to realize the need to have your vendors, your critical application, critical business process vendors begin their journey. It's a journey that organizations and vendors have to take, I think, hand in hand. I think it's important for enterprises to update their MSAs to create some obligation on the part of their critical vendors and to begin this journey with them. To the extent these organizations are replaceable or fungible, it's going to allow the enterprises to put a little bit more pressure on these vendors to do some things to get themselves aligned with their primary enterprise clients, and extends throughout the supply chain. Now, in terms of the Oracle Health, right? Oracle Health was the entity that was impacted. It was essentially a company that was bought, I think it was in 2022. And they were an electronic medical records company. And from what I understand, there was migration or integration of systems and data that was taking place, and certain credentials were compromised. And it's challenging sometimes to pinpoint without direct information the compromise occurred. But whenever you hear credentials being used to breach an entity that has been acquired, and I've worked with a ton of companies that have integrated companies that they have acquired, I've done all kinds of security assessments on the posture of the organizations of the acquired entity across a number of dimensions to ensure that those dimensions align with policies and standards and requirements of the acquiring entity. And that is done in part to avoid what we call dormant liability, right? Dormant liability accrues to an organization when the acquired entity, in this scenario, when the acquired entity, for whatever reason, didn't have a security posture that was sufficiently up to par. And it results in a degradation post-acquisition of the value of the company because of the liability that's created, liability that then manifests itself in a breach because credentials weren't properly managed, administrative credentials were default credentials, or they didn't do enough to ensure that there wasn't some dweller in the environment that had been in the environment prior to the acquisition. There's so many different facets of risk that can be ameliorated if a proper assessment is done as it relates to the infrastructure and data prior to consummating the transaction. You can always have a transition service agreement in place or a clawback agreement that you that you can put in place to help mitigate some of those damages, but the harm's already done at that point. So with regard to Oracle Health, to the extent that there is zero trust environments or zero trust protocols, very important because it would then lend itself to mitigating the access needed to do the exfiltration. If you have a SIM that is working, functioning properly, monitoring the credentials, monitoring access, Active Directory, or whatever IAM solutions you're implementing or have implemented, then you can mitigate a lot of that harm. The other thing to remember as well is that the new encryption algorithms are much more effective in terms of operational overhead. They tend to, at least from what I'm seeing, based on key size, they tend to be a lot faster than existing encryption algorithms. They tend to encrypt and decrypt data in many instances faster than the one-way encryption process with less than half the time. There's an operational efficiency that can be achieved with using a newer algorithm, and commensurate security increases can also be achieved as well. So those are two of the significant benefits.
It's one of those ripe scenarios where the better product or the better offering, the better security in this case, is also a more economical way to approach securing your enterprise as well.
Right. So you're doing a bunch of different things. You're getting rid of technical debt. And by virtue of having a more resilient enterprise, you now have achieved or implemented security EBITDA. Okay. And that is something that I think is extremely important, especially if you are developing bespoke zero trust solutions for the organization. You have the ability to convert that, what might ordinarily be OpEx, into CapEx, if that helps benefit your financial strategy. And it's funny, just yesterday, I was talking with an accountant around the categorization of certain types of spend. And so if an organization is looking to develop a bespoke approach that is something that's unique to them, it's a development initiative, et cetera, that can be characterized as CapEx. And obviously it's a nuanced thing and you should always consult your accountant. But we have some really novel approaches and thoughts around how organizations can accelerate their journey using the Cryptographic awareness and agility model, a maturity model, to get some sense of what's going on in the enterprise. We also have the ability to int other types of analysis in there as well, killing multiple birds with one stone.
There's still a lot to cover here, but I would like to say for anybody listening to this, on that note, feel free to reach out to us, wealthier.com, if that piques your interest, or you can reach us at service@wealthier.com as well, and we'll be sure to get back to you. So going a little bit further on how PQR and PQR transformation and the CAM model, as we call it, are something that enables not just a more secure organization with a better profit bottom line, but also one that can enable better AI usage, cloud modernization, and regulatory alignment, really all at once. And it starts at that data layer.
Yeah.
So talk about maybe a little bit more on the data side and the database and encryption side. of PQR. Feel free to go through some of these different security measures, which we've talked about. SIM is one of them here, as you mentioned. And then also just, again, that present day AI enablement, cloud modernization, and regulatory alignment that are addressed by this model.
100%. One of the areas that our practice has focused on is regulations like the EU AI Act, right? You've got 13 chapters and 113 articles. I've done actually quite a bit of analysis of those 113 articles, looking at looking at how certain articles and sections align with the benefits that the cryptographic algorithms, as well as immutable data storage. Okay. Immutability of data once it's stored is key to managing the provenance and lineage and authenticity, as it were, of evidence and or metadata. And to the extent you combine the cryptographic algorithms with immutable storage, blockchain. Blockchain is, most people are familiar with it, but there are different flavors of blockchain type capabilities. My favorite happens to be BlockDAG, which is basically a directed acyclic graph. It's a graph, but it has all of the benefits of blockchain without the latency because of the architecture. And so combining these technologies allow you to track the CI/CD pipeline, the continuous integration, continuous development pipeline, the SDLC pipeline, software development lifecycle, or system development lifecycle, depending on which you prefer. There are artifacts that are generated along the way as you go through the SDLC process for any application that you put out there in the marketplace. And there are artifacts that are generated as you're developing and deploying software real time, CI/CD, right? Continuous integration, continuous delivery. And those artifacts will help substantiate the origin of training models. They'll help substantiate the testing that you've done to ensure that the code base is free of vulnerability, to ensure that the training models that are best suited to eliminate bias, because one of the areas that the AI Act focuses on very heavily is bias. The AI Act is very human rights centric. And it's important to know that. It's also important to know that if you are an American company with operations anywhere in the EU, and you're deploying AI, you are subject to the AI Act, and you are also subject to the Product Liability Directive, which could cause strict liability to attach to any harm that is caused by the software, whether it's financial or otherwise, that you're using or deploying. Those are some of the things that need to be considered when it comes to AI. The other thing to consider, and I'm not really ready to get into this yet, but there are certain protocols, data management protocols, that are highly efficient. I'm talking with a couple of organizations now, very well-funded companies, one of which just got 25 million Series B funding, about integrating some of the capabilities we've described with their technologies, right? And so that lends itself to, that's just a double whammy of benefit, right? You have faster, better data delivery. You have heightened degree of security. You have provenance and lineage that applies across the board. And so these pillars, as they work, as I like to consider them, security, data authenticity, provenance and lineage, and efficiency, these are all pillars that are foundational and extend to any operation within the enterprise, within the
Right. And to go deeper, go ahead.
Go ahead.
To go deeper on the AI enablement side, when it comes to increasing top line, increasing efficiency within a company, better bottom line. When we're going out and you're approaching this database and encryption work, you mentioned these terms before, but you're assessing, analyzing, and classifying the provenance and the lineage of the data and building better work streams and workflows of the data in your organization, perhaps finding specific data silos which have been hidden away from your core workflows or not really utilizing that, you're not utilizing that data in the fullest way. By going throughout this PQR transformation, this post-quantum ready transformation, you're unlocking the value that's existing in that data that can help you build better products, get more insights, and build a more secure organization as well. So I wanted to include that part from the AI and the cloud modernization side of things. And then also, again, regulatory alignment. You talked about DORA and the AI Act, but also just your present day regulations that exist when it comes to your security standards and when it comes to the events that could be prevented or that would be nullified and reduced in their effect due to having the right approaches in place. It's really preparing your organization for what's coming next, but also getting the benefit of what's now. And again, top of mind, everybody wants to grow, increase profits. And by having better AI usages, we've seen the graph that came out 3 years ago, I believe it was a McKinsey graph about laggers and leaders when it comes to AI adoption. That has not gone anywhere. We've just moved a little bit, a few years to the right now.
Exactly.
Really an opportunity to continue to compound in the right direction and capitalize on the leader side of what is possible when it comes to the right approaches within your organization.
100%.
Now let's get into a tier one bank analysis that we did and some of the specific legacy technologies and the digital transformation opportunities that exist. So these numbers here, just to preface for everybody, were based on the analysis of a tier one bank. So that can give you an approximation of scale and the impact that we could have in your organization. And again, CAM is performance aligned. We are here to help you with the present day, but also do it in a model which makes your organization better, that your board can say yes to, and increases and maintains the profitability as we go throughout these rather uncertain, tumultuous, and potentially great geopolitical times, but we have yet to see. And it's always good to take the right approach, a smart approach that's really watching not only the bottom line today, but really over the long term as well. Rich, talk perhaps, I know we've talked about SIMs and maybe some of these others, but is there anything else you would like to, let's say, highlight one or two of these here, which stand out that organizations should be aware of and how they can upgrade their security posture? Maybe NATs, which you've alluded to here.
Yeah. One of the messaging protocols that I've been looking at of late is NATS. NATS is used very heavily within the financial services because it's very lightweight, hyper fast messaging protocol. It's a protocol that lends itself to faster data exchange, faster data aggregation, which in turn leads to faster transactions and faster awareness of events and things of that nature. And when I look at edge computing is essentially moving capabilities of processing data outward from the enterprise. They're, as opposed to aggregating everything, you're basically incrementally applying compute power at disparate locations to actually generate the value of the data at those disparate points. There's a security approach, secure access service edge, lots of players in that space. It's basically a zero trust layer that many enterprises are migrating towards. There's a significant amount of benefit that would come from leveraging the NATS messaging protocol in those circumstances. I'm looking at the implication that NATS has for SIMs, for collecting data from remote points. I'm also looking at the implication for IoT data to SIMs. So from a financial services perspective, and I also want to reiterate the fact that a SIM is an information event management system. So just security telemetry that can be aggregated and analyzed. It's a ton of business related stuff. So if you can aggregate AML, KYC type data in your SIM, if you can aggregate other types of OFAC list information, if you could aggregate certain front, middle, and back office data requirements, and then serve that data up faster with a higher degree of provenance and I would say integrity, right? In the security world, we always talk about CIA, right? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and data integrity, right? So you're able to capture and serve up data that has zero trust integrity. And that is a powerful thing. And then there's the journey to T0, right? There isn't enough time to get into that discussion, but at some point we might. And I think it's the approach that many organizations that are in the clearing and settlement space are looking to get to, because overall it creates a higher degree of efficiency. The more effective you are in validating the existence of an asset at a certain point, ascertaining that, you're reducing risk. And that risk itself translates into profitability because there's arbitrage opportunities that you may have. There are all kinds of ways that you can leverage these capabilities.
Fantastic. Now let's talk about what comes next, how we can drive results within 90 days and even within about a week with a free intel report. Talk a little bit more about the process which enterprises and executives can engage with us and get started right away if they're curious to know more about their security posture, where they stand, and how they can adopt CAM today.
Yeah, let's just talk about SIMs, right? Let's just talk about cost center activities that are necessary to support operations and compliance within the enterprise. I've been looking at how organizations that have the requisite competencies can get at competencies and access to the componentry in their environment, how they can begin that post-quantum cryptography ready journey. And one of the target areas that I think low-hanging fruit for many organizations is their SIM. If you can bolster the strength of your ingestion pipeline by making sure that the logs that you're using are stored immutably with cryptographic algorithms that are supporting quantum proof security, you can begin the journey fairly easily, right? And you don't have to eat the whole apple at once or whatever it is that you like to eat. So you can do it a little bit at a time, right? So that's one of the things that our CAM, it highlights and outlines areas that are low-hanging fruit opportunities that are also high impact, that are relatively non-disruptive to business processes per se. So making sure that you can see the value from a security perspective incrementally gives the organizations the confidence that they can move further out into the enterprise to begin their journey.
Great stuff, Rich. So what we'll do is we'll include a link down below or under this video to reach out to us at service@wealthier.com. And also a link to a landing page with more information and also a link to book a call with us there on that landing page. So Rich, it's been fantastic. Next video, we'll be talking about April security, cybersecurity need to knows for CISOs and enterprise executives. But until next time, Rich, thanks again for joining us.
As always, it's a pleasure. Thank you.